fat my head is. Pretty big. That's perfect. This camera, it's high definition. It has got some tremendous quality pictures that come out of it. And for me, when I'm fishing, I don't want to set a camcorder up and try to do all this stuff because I'm so encompassed in fishing that I end up just neglecting that. When we were down at Kentucky Lake, I meant to record us practicing and show us catching fish so I could put it on the website so everybody could see it. We were there 8 days practicing and I've got 0 minutes in fishing on the camera. I could not break myself away from fishing to do that. But with this, the camera's right up here on the hat and I can't even feel the weight of the camera on here. And it takes great pictures. If you go to Ice Fishing Ohio, his website, he's actually got some footage showing him fishing off the docks at Allen Creek. And you can see the quality of it. These things aren't expensive. How much are they? The hat's $35. The camera you can get at Best Buy and stuff said $129, something like that. Yeah, not very expensive at all. I want to get into a little bit. I always got to talk about bass a little bit. I'm going to talk about Indian Lake because I like fishing weeds, and most of you, I'm sure, have farm ponds you're able to go to, and if they've got weeds in them, I'm going to show you some of my favorite techniques of catching bass when we get into the weeds. The first thing I'm going to talk about, this is a Warrior tomahawk jig. It's got a fish head, and the way the head's designed, it presents a special fall. It's also really good for fishing weeds because the eyelet's more straight ahead in the head of it instead of at a 90-degree angle. So when you get into weeds, it doesn't get clogged with weeds as bad as, let's say, a traditional flipping jig. When you watch the fall of this bait, you see how it falls straight down. Now the other key to this fishing is, back in the old days, we've all have crawdads in our box, artificial crawdads. But they're just pieces of rubber that don't move. I mean, I know they look like a crawfish, but there's no action to them. Well, this Warrior Crawl is a group of, there's about 3 or 4 different types of these that are out on the market today, and I call them movement crawls. But the pinchers on them impart so much action to these baits that it's kind of like now having a cross between a spinner bait and a jig. You got the best of both worlds. You've got some vibration and movement out of it. And the biggest thing that I've noticed is a lot of times when I fish this thing the traditional way, where I'll maybe just move it a little bit off the bottom like this and get it back to the boat, when I go to reel it in like this, see those claws moving? I can't tell you how many times I've got hammered right at the boat before I go to pull this bait out of the water. So that's when we started spending a lot more time swimming the jig. When I get to Indian Lake real early in the year, this is one of the best times to go for bass. When the lily pads are just starting to emerge, but they're still under the water. You can get into areas that you would never get into in the summer because they're choked with lily pads. The bass are vulnerable. They're easy to catch that time of year. So what I'll do is I'll throw that jig out there and I'll just kind of swim it right above the top of the lily pads. If there's weeds down there, I want to keep it right above the weeds as well. Now, a lot of guys will throw spinner baits, and I do too, but a lot of times I'll get some of my bigger bites because you know how a jig is. A jig traditionally is one of your biggest bass techniques you can throw. But by swimming it right over top of the weeds, a lot of times you'll feel a hit, and when I do, I drop down a little bit, let them have it for a second, and then I'll rear back and let them have it. Thought I felt something hit it down there. See if I can get one to actually hit it. I come in first thing this morning. Every time I do in this tank, they grab it. But that's one of the things with this fishing you really got to pay a lot of attention to. The type of jig you're using and the type of trailer you're using. You want to have a jig that has the eye more forward on it. As far as equipment goes, I like having a stiff rod, maybe a 7-foot, 6'6". You can get away with that. I've got a flipping stick here. This rod is 7'6", and I want a very stiff action to this. When those fish grab that, I want to have a real stiff rod, so when I set the hook, I catch them. Get the hook to penetrate through them, because this is a much bigger hook than some of the The jigging spoons, for instance, I showed you earlier, they have real small, thin hooks. And it goes to the same principle. If I had a nail right now and I tried to stick it in my hand, I'm gonna have to push really, really hard to get that nail to go in there. If I have a needle, I'm not gonna have to push very hard and it'll penetrate my skin. So, the other thing is fluorocarbon line is really good to use for this, or braided a lot of times, because there's no stretch. And if there's no stretch, I'm gonna get a better, hook set into the fish. Another technique, I'll save the best for last, but another technique that I like, while I'm here, I'll show you these two. You watched me, for those of you that were here earlier, watched me try to get my rods all untangled. Usually I leave these on the whole time. But these are rod jackets. If you spend some money on a rod, it starts getting expensive, invest in one of these. This will keep your rods from getting beat up. It'll also keep you from getting tangled when you have to take your rods, in the car or your buddy's boat and take them out of your boat. The other thing is, for storage purposes, it's like a Chinese finger torture. When the rod goes down, this thing tightens up, so you can actually hang these on the wall during the winter when you're not using them. But it's a good investment to make. Rods are not cheap these days. A lot of the rods I use are anywhere from $150 to $400, so you definitely want to protect them. These expensive and light rods that you see today, if you get little dings in them, next time you go to set the hook, it may explode on you. So it's a good investment to make to protect your investment. This right here is a Warrior swim bait. The swim bait craze hit around here, probably hit 4 or 5 years ago. But out in places like California, it's been going on forever. The world record bass, the people chasing that, have been using swim baits now for quite a while. A lot of 20+ pound fish have been caught on these. Obviously I'm in Ohio again, so here I am with this little munchkin here, but when you get out to places like California, they're throwing swim baits that are like this. And there's bass that will eat them. But when I'm fishing these, once again, I like having somewhat of a stiff rod, bigger line, 15 or better or bigger line, 15-pound test. I don't like throwing braided line with this that much. I'd rather have monofilament or fluorocarbon again. Take this bait out. Depending on how you want to fish it, as soon as it hits the water, you can start retrieving it, or you can let it go to the bottom and then start retrieving it. When you're using a swim bait, don't go jerking it. Don't try to impart any action to it. It's just a slow reel. That's the way they want it. I feel like some of the better times to do this is early in the spring into the fall usually. Middle of summer, I don't have as much success with it. But when I get back into fall again and the shallow feeding frenzy goes on, I'll use it quite a bit. Get it out of the way there. So I'll let it hit the bottom. Somebody grab it. And just a slow reel like this. And this bait, not only does the tail move, but if you get up here and look at it, I know this color is a little hard to see because this is hologram shad and it resembles a shad in our waters around here very, very well. So it's kind of difficult to see, but it has an awesome action to it. And the thing about it is, when I'm fishing like the lily pads at Indian Lake, for instance, in that situation, I probably wouldn't hold my rod down like that because I'm fishing real skinny water. I'll hold my rod up high like this so I can keep that bait more towards the surface, just over top of those lily pads. And it's a visual bait as well. You do need water clarity.